Welcome back, everybody, to this kind of intro tutorial series thing that I'm doing here on using Blender for making Minetest nodes for using in your custom mods. Today, we are going to be creating two fire hydrants, actually, and I'm going to be doing two because there's two different trains of thought, and they both have their pros, they both have their cons, and we're going to kind of take a up close and personal look, as it were, at the differences between the two methods. So we're going to start by making a fire hydrant that is based on a cylindrical shape, and I'm going to use 8 vertices, and you'll see that that makes an octagon. And if we crank this up, we can get more, or we can get fewer down to all the way a triangle. I don't really recommend using anything too crazy high. Like 16 is probably more than sufficient. If you're going, smaller items, you can go to lower. But I would never use the default of 32 for a model that you're going to use in Minetest. It's just way too much geometry that you really don't need. Unless, I guess, you're making something that really needs all that extra smoothness to the edges, but you're gonna have a lot of people complaining that it looks too smooth, which is the number one con to using this method, is people will complain about it. Obviously, you should do what you want to do and not worry too much about what people say, but just know that people are going to complain about things being cylindrical, and I don't know why, because it looks nicer, but again, not really my place to say anything either way. And I really should have opened up a web browser tab with a fire hydrant picture, because I only see them every single day, like 2 houses down from me, but I don't know what it looks like well enough to just model on. Okay, I got some pictures here. Good. So we're going to do a cylindrical method, and we're going to do one in a cuboid method. So we'll add a cube here. I'm going to set the radius to 0.5, which will make it a 1 by 1 by 1, and then we're going to go in edit mode using tab to switch. Hit the Z key and change to wireframe, and then we'll click on, you can see these little black dots on the edges. Those are to select the faces, and we are going to hold down the control key and slide this in, and that makes it match up to the grid here. And we're going to move each side in 3 spaces, which will make this slightly smaller than the cylindrical version that we have going. Hit tab again, go out of edit mode, and I'm just going to scoot that over 1 space. So that would be sitting in the node next to this one. First thing right off the bat, this is too tall. So we're going to bring this down. Let's just do 2 spaces here. Those are tenths of Blender units. That's how the grid's broken up. You have 10 of the little squares. It's kind of based off the metric system, actually, so you could look at this as being centimeters and millimeters, or meters, and each one of these blocks is 10 centimeters. And if you zoom in enough, you'll see these are all broken down into tenths as well. That's as small as they break down. As you zoom out, you see that they turn into a larger grid still. Right? Actually, that grid stays the same. But yeah, it's kind of based on the metric system. You can use it with the English system. There's a setting to change that. But for something like this, there's really no point. And it's just easier to deal with decimals than try to work with fractions and stuff. So here's kind of our 2 starting points. I'm not going to put too much detail on these. We're going to want to put the little cone thing on the top. For this one, I'm just going to hit the E key and extrude upward to the top of the node, and then S to scale and 0.5, and that did not work. Let's try it again. Scale 0.5. I think I accidentally hit the enter key on the numpad. Alright, so that gives me the top of the fire hydrant, and we're going to do the same thing on the square one. So we'll select the top face, extrude up, scale 0.5. See, and that's what I would do. However, that would not be the right thing to do. So we'll go back to edit mode, and we will actually drag this down 2 spaces. So looking at the top view here, you will see we basically just created an inset. and we will put it up 1 space. I could put it up to 2, but I think it would stick up too high. See, when you're doing the cubic method, everything has to be 90-degree angles. And there is a reason for that, and it does make sense, because doing textures, you can get, you know, better pixel accuracy. So say, for example, each one of these spaces here is 1 pixel. That's a 2 pixels wide, 1 pixel high. Pixels will match up perfectly. You got something like this with an angle on it. Well, we got 2 pixels wide there, but we're looking at 4 pixels wide almost at the bottom. Pixels aren't going to match perfectly. You're going to see angles of the edges from pixels. For some people, that is just completely unacceptable. It's horrible. I'll let you make up your mind on if you think that's bad or good, or if you're indifferent, whatever. Just increasing the selection. We're selecting the top face there. And then Control Numpad Plus to increase selection. Shift D to duplicate that. Holding Control to move it around. R to rotate. Rotate it 90 degrees. We're going to actually put it down a little lower and scoot it in. And you'll see that the grid is not lining up. However, if I zoom in more, I go to the subgrid and line it up. And I'm going to line it up to that line. And then I'm going to actually Shift D and duplicate this. Put it on the other side and rotate it around. Now you might be wondering, why in the world did you just rotate that? But why would that matter? Because when I duplicated this, I did not include an inside face here. So we have the face on the outside, but there's no face on the inside of this little square, because you'd never see it. So it's pointless to have it there. It ends up taking up space on your texture map, and it increases the file size of the exported file and the saved Blender file as well. So there's really no point in doing that and including it. I'm going to select this one more time, and I'm going to pop it on the front side, rotate it 90 degrees. Again, you're going to notice that the grids don't line up. Not a problem. We just zoom in, and actually I can hit the G key, and then I can move on both axes here. And we'll put it on the front side. Now looking at my pictures here, the front one is larger. Now, this is where a problem comes in with making things pixel perfect. If I'm using this grid as 1 pixel, well, what do? Well, I could scale it. How do I explain this? I could change it. So each one of these grids I would represent with 2 pixels. So this would be 4 pixels wide and 2 pixels tall. In which case, I can drag this up 0.5, drag these sides out 0.5, and I will essentially, by doing this, be adding 2 pixels to it, and I'll probably drag the front side out 0.5 as well. It's something you kind of have to mess around with to figure out how your pixels are going to work. If you wanted, you can go ahead and put the little nub thing on, and you could do that in 2 methods. And I will show both on opposite sides here, and we will kind of look at pros and cons to each. So hit the E key to extrude, Control, Enter, that puts it in the exact same place. Scale with the S key, 0.5. We made it smaller and extrude it out, and we want to extrude it out 0.5. And that's the little cap now on there. Now our other option would be to select this whole side, Shift D to duplicate it, put it here, and scale 0.5. And then we just have to scoot it in so it matches up, which it actually won't match perfectly. It will be off by half. However, not to worry, because if we go to the local, or the local here, I don't know why it's moving that far. We just want to put this to, I think, 0.7. Nope, let's do 0.65. Okay, it should be 0.6 something. 0.6. It was 0.68, so let's try 0.69. Nope. 0.67. Honestly, the easiest way to do it is just slide it till it's about right. And then this is okay, it should be 0.75, and get rid of that 0.3, and now it matches perfectly. So we did that. So pros and cons. Well, let's switch back into edit mode. And let's actually only view that. So if we hit the dash key on numpad, we'll go to local view. And now we're only seeing this mesh. And you know what? I'm going to turn this on to solid mode. Let's look at this side. We have the 4 faces going around and 1 on the end. And then we have the same thing repeated here. 1 on the end, 4 faces going around. Relatively easy to map because we're just looking at 2 boxes. And this will pretty much all, if we select like these edges here, and we'll get to UV mapping in a while, and then mark those as seams and unwrap, it'll turn into a pretty much a plus sign is what that'll turn into. This one over here, we could do the same thing. We would mark these 4 edges, and then we'd have to mark this whole seam going around here because we want it to be cut there, and mark these because again we want to turn this one into a little plus sign, and it would still work just fine. But we now created, let me go back to face select mode, we created 4 extra faces. You might think, well, it's really not a big deal. And you know what, you're right, it probably isn't. But if you do this 20 or 30 times on a model, you know, you just created 80, 120 extra faces, and it's not really, it's 3 times as many because you have to have 1 face. So we created 3 extra faces that we didn't need to. But still, you're creating extra faces. It's just one of those things to kind of keep in the back of your mind. It might be better if you just do a square face and then slap another one right in front of it. As far as rendering and stuff goes in the game, you're not going to notice any difference anyway. So it really doesn't make a huge difference. It's not a make or break kind of thing, but something to keep in mind. All right, let's go on to the cylindrical one here. Now, first thing we're going to notice with the cylindrical guy is we have points on both sides in the front. We don't want that because we want stuff coming off. Easy enough to fix. Rotate, control key to constrain it, and we're going to notice, 25 is too far that way, 20 is too far this way. I've done the math before, so we can hit R on the keyboard and then do 22.5, and that'll make a perfect rotation for an octagon. The math to figure it out, I believe, is dividing 360 by the number of faces. Does that sound right? 22, 360, 60. That does not sound right at all. Maybe we have to divide 180. I don't know. Whatever, that's the right number. I figured it out once. I don't remember how I figured it out. We could honestly leave it the other way and it wouldn't matter. Like, the faces will still work. Okay, and what I'm going to do, it's kind of cheating, but whatever. It works. I'm just going to duplicate the entire thing. Rotate it 90 degrees. Select the bottom face. Bring that way in. Take this outside face. Bring that in. Look at it, say, yeah, that looks good. You know what, though? I don't need that inside face here. So let me go ahead and get rid of that. And honestly, bottom face, I really don't need that either. And while I mentioned bottom face, let me take the bottom face off the square one as well. X key to delete, by the way. And then let's go back, select this whole shebang here, and slide it on in. And of course, it's much too large. So we're going to scale this down by hitting the S key, scaling. I want to have it, I guess, 0.4, because that's about the size of that face. This sticks in a little bit. That's okay, though. Yeah, that looks fine. And then I will duplicate this with Shift D, put it on the other side, rotate around. I could have also done R180 to rotate it. That would have accomplished the exact same thing. Now, looking at this, they both stick in different amounts. Now, because this green line represents my 0 point, this will be negative, this side's positive. So I can select all of this and look at my global median, which is 0.29667. And then I go here, and I just do negative 0.29667, and they both stick into the center post the exact same amount now. Is that little bit something you're going to notice in game? Honestly, no, probably not. I, however, am a perfectionist, and it needs to be right, so that's why I did that. And we're going to throw this front one on. It's sticking out a little bit, but you know what? We're going to make this bigger. And actually, let me change my global median here to 0 so it's centered. I'm going to scale this up just a little bit. Something like that, I guess. It really doesn't matter. And I'm going to slide it down one space, and I'm going to have to slide it in a little more so I don't have an edge showing. There we go. Let's go ahead and view that in solid mode. Alright, so we have a pretty legit looking fire hydrant there, and a square one next to it. Not bad, not bad, not bad. Alright, so let's go ahead and go into UV editing and talk about everything I did wrong when I made these models. Okay, so let's select one of those and unwrap it. This is just kind of everything squished to go flat. Not really optimal. You're going to have very stretched pixels. Let me actually move this little box here. And go ahead and create a new image with a color grid, just so we can demonstrate. Change this to textured mode. Look here, we have, let me actually turn off see-through there. The front of it, it's very non-deformed, which makes sense. Go to the outside here. Wow, this is getting really deformed. Look at how these little grid lines are going all crazy and stuff. That looks horrible. That is complete garbage. Whoever made this UV map should be shot. So obviously a problem. So what's the fix? Well, let's make some seams. Let's actually change to go away. Change to edge select, Control E, and mark a seam. And then I'm actually going to go through and mark every single seam on these edges here. And you might be thinking, why in the world would you do that? That sounds so crazy. Honestly, you're probably not thinking that at all, because if you're watching this, you're probably new to Blender and you're going, okay, well, I don't know why he's doing that, but I don't know why he's doing anything he's doing here. I'll just keep watching and find out. And we'll unwrap now, and suddenly our pixels are, yeah, they're pretty much all square and staying the same size, and it all looks really good. But it can be better. In this case, let me turn on UV's constraint image bounds. In this case, all of these sides are the exact same. So let's pop them all on top of each other. This will make creating a texture easier, because every single one can use the exact same texture. So we only have to create the texture once, and then every side will use it. So for example, say we wanted to put, say, a little rim there, and like some dashed lines going out on this or something to represent, you know, smaller bumps on it or something. We do that once and it shows on every single one, and it's perfect. This is where I screwed up, and it's not really screwed up per se because I intentionally did it, but I did one of these. Now I have to go do both of these. All that work, see? I unwrap it, and now I have to remark all the seams, and then I have to do the exact same thing on this side, and that's a lot of wasted time. So pro tip, if you're doing something and you know you're going to have multiple of the same sections of mesh, like these 3 nubs, the best thing to do is unwrap one, like we did right here, and then simply reuse that. Shift D to duplicate it, throw it over here, slip it in place, boom, 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 it's done. It's already got your material on there. It's ready to go. You only have to do that that process once, which makes things really save a lot of time. I'm going to actually eliminate all of that, and I'm going to go through and manually do both of those, but I will cut video when I get to that point. Let's change this back to textured mode Z. Again, toggles between your different shading modes. The top of the fire hydrant and to the sides, we're going to use the exact same method that I used for that little nub. We're going to select the top of it and mark seam, and then do every single edge. Only reason we're doing this is because a fire hydrant is, well, it's a tube, cylinder, however you want to refer to it, and it uses the exact same texture on every side of it. So what we can now do is unwrap that, and we've got a bunch of these faces. We're going to stack them all on top of each other, and then basically do the exact same thing we did with this little side piece. So we'll select all of those, and we'll select all of these, and then we will select our untitled image here. Okay, and here's where we start having to do some figuring out of things. These two items are scaled completely different, which means our pixels here are much smaller than they are here. We can get more detail here than we can on this because the map is larger. So we want to scale that down till we get the pixels to kind of line up, which we're just going to go off the grid and say that this line and this line should kind of match. If this is smaller than that, it means this needs to be scaled smaller, which will make that bigger. It's kind of reverse what you would think, but that's how it works. Whoops, that was pretty close. Let's scale it a little larger. That might be perfect. It's good enough for me. Okay, so now this is what we're looking at for our UV map. It has a lot of empty space in it. So, can we somehow make this larger? So we can use a smaller image or whatever. Well, yes, we can. So let's go ahead and rotate that upright for no reason other than because my OCD says it should be pointing upright. And we'll line that up at the bottom, and we will select this and slide that over here, move that there. It really doesn't matter. We're going to highlight everything, or we could use the A key to select everything, move it to about the center, and then scale it larger. Now be careful. If you're constraining your UV maps to the bounds, as you scale, you will hit a bottom edge or a side edge or whatever, and you will continue scaling on the other axis. So you got to watch, so when you hit that, you stop going larger, otherwise you're distorting your UV map. And we're going to put this up a little bit. And that's probably good. I'm going to slide it back over to the side here. I could get away now with an image that's a tall rectangle, so maybe 64 by 32. Because this line right here is the center. So it'll just be twice as high as it is wide, and it'll fit. And these two sides are going to use the same texture as that front. So that one is complete. Let's go on to the square. The square one we're going to use actually pretty much the exact same process. Select all the edges. This one we're going to select the top edge there because that's going to have its own map. And we will, oops, not the U key, we want to do Control E, mark seam. And then we need to, oops, not that. The top we're going to turn into a plus sign. So we select the bottom edge and the sides. And leave the top unselected, Control E, mark seam. And let me select that, and we're just going to unwrap. And you'll see what I mean by the plus sign. That's our top. This is that top ring. This we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to make a lot of plus signs, honestly, with this guy. Control E, mark seam. We're going to make a plus sign with this one. Remembering that we need to go in and select these inside faces. Mark seam. And you know what? Got to mark these ones to turn that into a plus sign. And have to mark all of these. Holding down the shift key as I right click to select all of these edges. Control E, mark seam. I think I've got everything. Let's see what happens when we unwrap. And let's go add our color texture back. Okay. That looks pretty good with the exception of this top. For some reason that is rotated 45 degrees. Instead of being square on, it is all crooked. Which I don't know why that's the case. Where is that one? Here it is. Okay, well let's change that and fix it. So rotate 45 degrees, looks perfect. Okay, we can do the same thing we did with the cylindrical fire hydrant here. You can throw all of the sides together because they're all going to be the exact same textures. Important thing to note, you don't want to have one upside down, which that one I lucked out and turned it the right way, but that's something to keep in mind. You don't want it upside down. So just look at it. They all are the same. D8 is all in the top right corner on them. So that looks good. This top ring here, actually let me go to face select mode. You can select items and then they will highlight over in the UV editor. If you click this little thing here, keep UV edit mesh nodes in sync, it'll show you all of them and it will just highlight whichever one you've selected on the object, which can be handy so you kind of know your spacing. It also does reverse, and when you select here, it selects out there. So this is our top ring. We're just going to throw that into the corner there. This selection should be one of, well, that's the front. Okay, so the side. Now see, that we can't do how I want it, but that works because I need these selected too. So that works. Okay, I guess. Ish. I need to select all of these. And we're going to put that right on top. Ooh, that's not right. Oh, that's why. Okay. We're going to throw that on top of this one. And let's select the front faces there. Both of these sides are going to share the exact same texture. We have H8 kind of in the corner there. This one, it is rotated a different direction. So let's fix that. Here we go. H8. So when looking at it, you're going to have that facing forward and that side facing back. If you want both facing forwards, scale Y -1. Whoops, let's try scale X -1. Scale X -1. One way we'll flip it. There we go. So now as you look at this, both fronts will be fronts, tops will be tops, backs will be backs, and bottoms will be bottoms. You decide which way you want to have your textures match up. If you want them symmetrical looking at it from the front or from the side, however. And then we're going to do the same thing with these little front nibs here, which that's just these two. So I'm going to go ahead and use the B key to do a box selection and move those two on top of each other. Box select once more, and I'm going to actually, yipes, box select that. I'm going to throw these in a corner because I want, okay, see that's, I'm going to turn this off for a second here. I want both of those to be bumped up to the corner. So they're sharing the exact same UV. And then I can throw them wherever. This. One of the other things that this little thing changes is, like right now when I select, it's selecting all connected faces in the UV editor. When that's turned on, it just selects that individual face, which can mess up the UV to some extent. So I think that is all set then. That's all UV unwrapped. Everything's pretty good. Now we could do another method here. We could take each side as its own face and stack them, like we did with all of the faces on this. So we would use the exact same texture for the top, front, bottom, and side. It's kind of up to you. It depends on if you want to use the same texture all the way around on each face, or if you want each face to have its own texture. Something you need to decide on yourself. There is no right or wrong way to do this. It's the important thing to remember here. There's no rules that you must abide by. You pretty much are free to do whatever you want. Now the last thing I always like to do is just kind of try to pack these in a little closer so I can then scale it larger and basically get more use out of my pixels. So there's really not a better way to do this one. I can scale it a little more, right about there. Alright, so that's going to be my unwrapped version of that one, my unwrapped version of this one. We are going to stop the video for a brief moment while I unwrap these two faces, and then I'll be right back. And we're back. As you will notice, faces have all been updated. This side, the threes are pointing up. This side, they're pointing down. Could be fixed. Not really worried about it because it's going to be an exact mirrored object anyways. There's just going to be like two lines running down the center of it. So in my case, it doesn't matter. And to honestly go through and select every face and flip it, it's too much work for a tutorial video. So I'm not going to bother with it. So let's get into exporting the UVs. Let's see how we do that. UVs, export UV layout. You know what? I haven't created a folder for this yet, which I probably should have. We're going to do this. B3D for Minetest is what I'm going to call that folder. And we are going to go ahead and call this fire underscore round. What size we want to export this as? We do want to export it as a square. You always want to export a square. So as you are going to skew, even if you're only filling up half of it, you still want to export square. You can always crop it. But if you export it as a taller than wider or wider than taller, you are going to get goofy results. So let's go ahead and open a file browser here. And let's take a look at this. Alright, so we have pretty legit looking UV map there, if I don't say so myself. That's super legit. Let's go ahead and export the square guy. Select everything on this to make it all show. UVs, export UV layout. We want to go in the exact same folder. And we want to call this one fire underscore cube. And let's set this to 256 as well. And export that. Take a look at that one. Looks pretty legit. Alright, and then we're going to open our favorite image editor. There we go. I don't know why that wasn't working. You are free to use whatever image editor you want. You have Corel, use Corel. You have Photoshop, don't use Photoshop. You have MS Paint, don't use MS Paint. You have GIMP, use GIMP. You have Krita, use Krita. Actually, if you want to use MS Paint or Photoshop, I mean, it'll work just fine. As long as you can export PNGs, you're good. I have... Oh, that's right. Krita is not installed. It's a app package. I have GIMP and I have Krita. It really doesn't make any difference for this. I'll just use GIMP. Yeah, use whatever you're familiar with and comfortable with. It does not matter what software package you're using. Everything's going to have kind of the same kind of options these days with the exception of MS Paint. Sorry, all you MS Painters, but you're kind of got to figure it out for yourself. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to make it transparent. You actually don't have to do this. You can paint directly on that. I don't recommend doing that simply because, well, it's pretty easy to mess stuff up then. Actually, I want to make that a 1 pixel brush. So let's zoom in on this and see what a 1 pixel brush looks like. It's kind of small. Let's make it a 2 pixel brush. It's more like it. Okay, first things first. Let's throw this layer underneath this fire cube. And let's actually grab a red color. Because fire hydrants are usually red, you know. And fill. Boom! It's filled. Now, when you export, you have transparency. As things are layered, transparency is layered up. As long as we always paint on this lower layer, we can just turn off the visibility on the UV map when we export. And everything will be fine. So, keep that in mind. I honestly have no idea what any of this stuff is. This is the sides. So we're going to make a darker color here. And we're going to zoom in on this. And let's just draw a box here at the bottom. a lot of programs are going to be very different in how this works. So I'm just using Shift to make a straight line. If whatever software you're using is going to support that or not, I have no idea. And Shift and Control actually to do that. So I have a little bit darker color at the bottom, you know, just to represent some grunge and all that good earthy stuff. And then I'm going to make a few lines here. I actually made this UV map way too big. And if I actually cared about this, I would be counting pixels and making sure that spacing all matched up. And I actually would have even thought about that when unwrapping. But because this is only a tutorial, I will, however, be making the blend file available for download. And these textures, I will put them in a zip for lesson 2. So that should make that pretty easy. And you guys can kind of take a look at everything. See, if I really cared, I would have made all these bottoms match. Spacing would all be the same, but not too worried about it right now. All right, let's go ahead and export as. And we want to call this Fire Cube, whatever. I mean, you can call it whatever you want. I am going to do Fire Cube underscore call standing for color. I would have normally saved this as a underscore UV on these, but whatever, doesn't matter. Okay, that was the square one we were doing. So let's make sure we're selected on the square one here. And let's open up a new image, which we actually click this button for. And we want to go to here and there. Boom. And okay. We have a fire hydrant with lines. These lines are blurred. It's because Blender always turns on MIP mapping. Let's turn that off. We have crisp lines now. If you're noticing this looks very shadeless, it's because there is no lights in the scene. If you get rid of the lights, all of your faces will pretty much be illuminated evenly, and you don't have to try to work around shadows and stuff. Of course, that can be detrimental because it's perfectly shadeless. So if you need some lights to kind of see how that's looking, you can always add in a light. Like so. And do that. And rotate that lamp around so you kind of get some lighting on there. But then you get black faces. So you usually have to do like 3 lights. And it's just easier not to have lights at all. So yeah, that's how we would do that. And then of course for the faces going around all these pluses. Honestly, I could have put all of these pluses on top of each other. Because they're all getting the exact same texture. Which is nothing more than some straight lines. And you can tell I'm being really sloppy about this. Again, if this was something I was actually making, I would probably be using my graphics tablet and Krita. But because it's not, I'm just using my mouse. As you can probably hear, clicking feverishly away. And yeah, drawing this. Quality like no other. Man, that's some MS Paint quality stuff right there. If you can't tell, I kind of dislike MS Paint. But boom, there we have it. And yeah, we would pretty much just do that for all of our faces. And we'll do the exact same thing for the cylindrical one here. Let me just go ahead and open that with GIMP. And we're going to do the same thing. Create a new layer, fill it with transparency, throw it underneath. Unfortunately, I don't have the bright red. I believe O is color selector. Yep. Take the fill bucket here, fill that. Switch back to this. Take the pencil. Let's throw some long lines running up and down on this. It's almost impossible to see through this one because of the layering. Which honestly doesn't make sense. Because there's 8 layers here. No, actually it does make sense, because the square one only has 4. So this is twice as unsee-through. This looks weird, though. Oh, never mind. That makes sense, too, because there's only 4 here. No, there should still be 8. There's 8 there, and there's 16 here, which is why you can almost not even see through this one. Okay, and you know what? I forgot something on the other one. I forgot the darker dots in the center. So let's pop that there And that there. I don't think that's perfectly centered. It's good enough though. You know, I'd probably want to actually make this a square dot in the center of those. And I guess I forgot that one altogether. I painted this on the wrong layer. Always double check which layer you're painting on. There we go. One of these doesn't need the dot because it has something covering it. Alright, let me re-export this one. And let's go ahead and export this one to underscore col. Just use all the default values. Okay, let's go ahead and reload that one. There we go. Now we have the little dots in the centers. Perfect. And let's go ahead and select our round one here and see how that looks. Beautiful, beautiful. Obviously, you would want to put more work into it. Like, no dot. I don't even need to tell you that. Like, just both of these look... Honestly, the textures look like garbage. Okay, they should have been made a lot better. I honestly could have used a lot smaller textures. Could have figured out the spacing way better. Put some solid lines, some, like, rims, some dots for, like, the bolts. You could do that on the square ones, too. You know, a lot of little things you can add in with the texture that really make a big difference. One thing I should mention as a pro with using the squares, you have an option here to, which of course we can't see because I have that, to snap to pixels, which does as it sounds, makes your thing snap to pixels. So right now I'm using a 256 image texture, so you don't really notice it too much. But if I was using something smaller, say 16 by 32, you can actually line these up so it would be pixel perfect. And if we were going to do, you know, all of these little bump things here with the exact same texture, we could line them up and have it, whatever, say 6 pixels by 12 pixels, if that's the size we wanted to work with. And it would snap it exactly to those sizes. And that's really nice when you're working with pure cuboid meshes. When you get to things with round lines, it does not work well. Because, say I want to snap this to pixels, that one you don't really notice so much. I don't know if I will on this either because it's still pretty large. You can kind of see it as we move it around. It's going goofy because it has to fit to a pixel grid. So, if you use square stuff, snap to pixels works really well for it. If you're using something that has less or greater than 90-degree angles, I do not recommend using snap to pixel. Of course you can. You're free to do whatever you want. But I don't recommend it just because you're going to get some distortion that wouldn't necessarily be there otherwise. Alright, so that wraps this up. In a further episode, we will look at some slightly more advanced things with UV mapping. Well, not with UV mapping. Well, kind of. With doing textures like how to bake ambient occlusions to kind of get some shading going in here. Lower face will be darker. And of course, it's all stuff you can tweak when you mix it together with your final texture. But it's nice to be able to do that because the game engine does not do any kind of ambient occlusion on it. So it'll all be the same brightness, where like the undersides of these and these inside faces should be a little darker just because of how light works in the real world. But yeah, that's going to end this up. Because I stopped it in the middle, I really don't know what the length is, but we're probably looking at like 45 minutes. Yikes. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for episode 3. I don't know what we're going to be talking about yet, but I've got lots of good suggestions on the forum topic I have created. Let me mention again, as I mentioned in the previous episode, I do freelance work in Blender and textures. Feel free to reach out to me. Website is in the description. And yeah, if this is just completely over your head and you're like, dude, I cannot figure this out. And that could entirely be my fault. It's just a horrible teacher. I don't know. But yeah, if you don't want to learn it to make a model, you can ask me to make it for you. And for a couple bucks, I can probably pull something off. So yeah, catch you next time.